Now they've got the USS Carl Vinson pointing in the right direction. Is the US sending a clear message of strength or stumbling towards World War III? Let's get some expert analysis on that from two former top diplomats. Peter Mandaville, who is a former advisor to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton during the Obama administration. He's now at the George Mason University. Peter, first on Syria, do you think we are seeing a new American strategy forming yet?
I think the strike itself was a fairly easy calculation for the administration to make. If you can imagine a situation room where Trump asks his advisors for options and whether the strike is a good idea, he's going to get a lot of people saying that the downside risks are minimal, the costs are ones that we can stomach, and it helps you on various fronts, both domestically and internationally, so go ahead and do that. But what it has certainly set in motion over the last few weeks are people suddenly asking questions about the longer-term strategy that the administration wasn't having to deal with. And so we've seen over the last couple of weeks quite a lot of flip-flopping and back and forth as different senior officials within the U.S. foreign policy and national security apparatus put forward rather differing and in some cases seemingly contradictory views with respect to questions such as the ultimate fate of the Syrian president and whether his removal from power, is the starting point of the U.S. policy or something that they may get to further down the line.
If that Syrian chemical weapons attack had happened in November or December rather than in April, do you think President Obama would have given the same order?
I think that if there had been the use of a chemical weapon like sarin nerve gas with that kind of impact, I think that the Obama administration would seriously have considered a military response of some sort. Whether they would go ahead with it, I don't actually know. I think that in this particular case, Trump was keen on the one hand to interrupt a news cycle that was dominated by headlines about the potential collusion of his campaign aides with the Russian government. And also I think Trump wanted to have the opportunity to very clearly draw a line of differentiation between himself and Obama, and to show that he was willing to entertain more muscular options.
So, of course, hot on the heels of that, we saw first the use of the largest non-nuclear weapon in the American arsenal, the Moab in Afghanistan, and now we've seen a ratcheting up of tensions with North Korea. Do you view these things as being entirely isolated, or are we seeing something more broadly approaching a Trump Doctrine emerging here?
No, I think these things are all very much linked, and I think one way of reading the significance of the airstrike on Syria is to see it first and foremost as a piece of geopolitical communication aimed, yes, to some degree at the Syrian regime, but as much at governments such as those in Tehran and Pyongyang in North Korea, with whom the United States has been rattling sabers in recent weeks, and again to sort of send a message that the United States has a broad range of military options at its disposal, and under Trump may be more willing to use them.
So how much of this is just saber rattling, do you think? And how much of this, I mean, you believe the chyrons on cable news, we're minutes away from World War III right now?
Yes. I mean, and we live in a news ecosystem that frankly thrives on that kind of stuff. And so, we're I think, likely to those sorts of headlines are likely to be more prominent. But, let's remember that there's always a lot of communication and action and diplomacy going on behind the scenes that we don't see. So just for example, with respect to U.S.-Russia relations in Syria, I think the Russians had to kind of perform a little bit of theater about being very upset about the U.S. airstrike, but I don't think that it ultimately has had a significant impact on the prospect for some longer-term U.S. partnership with Russia in solving the Syria quagmire. Likewise, with respect to North Korea, I think there's probably a lot of communication and diplomacy that's gone on between Washington and Beijing in recent weeks, in which there's other things and other layers of action in play that aren't entirely visible to us on the North Korean front as well.
Do you think, Peter, that the foreign policy establishment in Washington is generally reassured by the presence of McMaster, Mattis and Tillerson as well, and that concerns about a too kind of instinctive presidency, maybe just firing off cruise missiles because they're popular, that isn't going to be the way things play out?
There have been signs that those career national security people seem to be bringing the president around to understanding the what's at stake, the complexity and the risks of some of these issues, and I think maybe reconfiguring his assumptions about the range of options that may be available to him. And yes, so I think the kind of national security apparatus in Washington is watching that trend with some considerable relief.
Well, Peter, it's good to talk to you. Thank you very much for taking the time.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.